from the heart of Dubai, where tomorrow is being built today, to the world. Welcome to the CTO Show with Mehmet. Here, we redefine technology and reimagine possibilities. With Mehmet, delve into the riveting realms of AI, cybersecurity, and digital technology. Experience the thrilling highs and lows of startups. Immerse yourself in the spirit of entrepreneurship and witness the future of business innovation being written in real time. Now, without further ado, let's tune in and explore the future.
Hello and welcome back to a new episode of the CTO Show with Mehmet. Today I'm very pleased joining me, I think a well-known figure, especially in the SaaS and builder space, Frank Sondors, founder of Salesforge and other forges. Thank you for being here with me today. As I was explaining to you just before I hit the record button, the way I love to do it is I keep it to my guests to introduce themselves. So maybe some people, they don't know you. I doubt that. But still, tell us a little bit more about your background, your journey, and then we can kick it off from there. So the floor is yours, Frank.
Sure. Thanks, Mehmet. Thanks for having me as well. So my name is Frank Sondors, and I'm the CEO of Salesforge. Not a CTO. I have a CTO and I have a CPO as well. Both of them are actually engineers. So I've spent in software and sales for well over a decade. So you could call me a software guy. You can call me a sales guy. It's for me kind of same. Started my career really back in the days at Google, so big corp, 60,000 plus employees. Work out of the Dublin office for them, and sold a bunch of ads. And then I moved over to working for a company called SimilarWeb in big data and kind of competitive intelligence space. This is where I learned how to give your competitors really hard time, how to spy on them, and all that jazz. And then I went over to work for a company called Black Crow. They're in the machine learning space. So that's called the old school AI. That AI still exists. You have to predict in real time conversion probability of a certain user and what they may do on your website. So that was really, really fun. So this is when I was exposed to AI for the first time. And I did there some good stuff in terms of scaling for the company and selling that as a SaaS solution to a lot of heads of marketing. And then in my last job, I led a sales team of about 50. And this is where I had the inspiration, I guess, to start Salesforge, because I observed in my last job that it was growth essentially at all costs, right? So the main way how you were acquiring a sales pipeline and how you were closing in on revenue was by hiring more and more heads. So that was the main lever to target attainment. And I thought that was really broken. Why wouldn't you have significantly fewer heads in your team and being able to achieve superior output levels? I always typically say, for every 10 salespeople that you hire, and I hired hundreds of salespeople in my lifetime, and also fired a lot of them as well. But you would typically say that for every 10 salespeople that you hire, one is only natural, really one is the max. About 2 to 3 people can be trained up to be somewhat good as the person that's natural, and 60% is typically deadwood. So these individuals should not be in sales. They should be doing something else, but not definitely sales. So a lot of people end up in sales from different walks of life, but many of them are just not designed to be in sales. So what we're trying to do is help to increase the output of the 40% and reduce essentially the 60% of the headcount for the companies out there.
Great. And thank you again, Frank, for being here with me today. Now, it's good like you explained why you started that, your current company. But why no one else was taking care of the multiple challenges that, usually, especially people who are working in SaaS will relate this a lot. And you mentioned like grow at all costs and, just hire more salespeople. Do you think the direction was going towards non-relevant tools, or was it a blind spot that no one else was seeing, Frank? Because, when I look at the stack that you've built, and this is why, people will understand why you wrote there Salesforge and other forges, is because, there's a stack behind, sales, especially in our business, in SaaS and technology in general, that people think, and you said something really that resonates with me. Some people, they end up finding themselves, they are working in sales, but they shouldn't be there. So what are like these blind spots that you spotted, and then you built this whole, concept of, having this tool that can help people in increasing the efficiency of the current sales force that they have?
Yeah, so the best way to look at it is that if you're in a VC-backed company, typically VCs and everybody, including your CEO, would tell you, go hire more and more people, because typically more heads in sales has meant more pipeline and more revenue for the company. And that was the old school way of thinking. However, most smart sales leaders out there in the world, they would typically agree that more heads in sales doesn't mean more sales for the company or more pipeline necessarily. And the main problem just that I have observed, apart from more headcount didn't lead necessarily to more sales, was also the fact that to acquire net new dollars these days for any software company or any other company out there is really becoming more and more expensive. So, and that's because there's more competition out there. It's much easier to build software out there. So that's why you have more competition. So essentially, it doesn't matter what you do, and even if you believe that you're in the blue ocean, trust me, there is a competitor. Typically, that competitor in most of the cases is Excel, right? So Excel is always a competition, or a Google Sheets these days. But there is typically at least one competitor that you have in this space, and that's because it's so easy to build software these days. It doesn't matter whether you have a CTO or not, but there's also a lot of these new softwares that keep popping up out there where you don't even need a CTO. So, for example, Lovable is one of them, based out of Europe, where you can just prompt the software and it will spit out code for you and ultimately a software for you. And that's a nice start. And then after that, you definitely need a proper CTO after that. But again, going back to the problem of when I observed, that it was very expensive to be acquiring net new dollars. To solve really the problem that we want to solve, which is top of the funnel and the sales pipeline problem for the companies, that problem is so convoluted. There's so many micro sort of problems that need to be solved, that it's quite a huge undertaking from an engineering standpoint. So in order to really solve that problem, you have one option that you can go down, is the super app concept. The super app concept meaning you just cram a lot of features into one single app, into one single brand. And that, for example, could be, examples like Salesforce or HubSpot, for example, etc. Right? So one brand, one software, you just cram a lot of features and you satisfy the needs of your users. Now, we thought that everybody's sort of building along the similar lines of building a super app. But in our space, we didn't see what we call the other approach, what we call the modular approach, where you essentially build software and you compound on top of each other and you sell that to the same user and to the same customer. So as I mentioned, there's multiple different problems that our customers have. So what we do is we essentially build a software for each one of those problems. And then it's very easy to be connecting these softwares together from an integration standpoint, data flows, and multiple other things. So think of it as a sort of an Apple ecosystem or a Microsoft ecosystem, right? Where you have different products that solve different problems, but they're talking to each other very nicely. So I'll give you like even an example feature that we have, which is similar to those companies, is we have, just like Apple has Apple ID, we have Forge ID. So you can log into the different softwares, and seamlessly, and everything is connected to your one user account. So what we're doing is we're building that sort of ease of use that the users were craving for, because otherwise, in order to solve their pipeline problem these days, they really need to be buying sort of about 10 point solutions. So essentially, from 10 different vendors, you buy 10 different solutions, and you're stitching that together. That's what the reality looks like. I call that the Android experience. And the Apple experience is where you're going to one company. This one company provisions all the softwares for different pain points, and you buy everything from one company, right? So you have one invoice, one support team, et cetera, et cetera. So there's that ease of use as well. So you don't even need to hire, a sales operations manager to be managing all that for you. So we've been doing this for about 22 months right now. In 22 months, we've built 6 softwares. That's how fast we build. About 12 months ago, there were just 3 co-founders in the company, and right now there's over 40 people in the business. And in the first year, we scaled from $0 to $3 million in ARR. So that's how fast we grow. But the way we think about generally about building these different products is we essentially have internally, let's call it a squad, essentially, for each of the products. You have a squad, and that squad just builds that product. It's essentially, it's like having a startup within a startup. So we have 6 startups within the startup, essentially.
That's very cool. You mentioned something, Frank. I'm gonna come back about what tactics you use to reach the 3 million ARR, but you mentioned something about the top of the funnel, right? And finding those leads. So if today I go to the website and I find different tools for me, but really, but like what I hear from people, their problems is always to find, not finding the leads, is to find like leads that actually are aligned with what they are offering. So this is why we see people, for example, talks about like outreach and how more difficult it started to become. um the use of AI. So some people, especially I'm talking from customers perspective, prospects perspective, they started to hate being reached out by people like just randomly. So from someone who's doing this, and you've done this also before as a sales professional, what are you seeing in this space, Frank? Like, is it really something which is, you know, people are struggling with? Is it lack of data really? Is it like lack of research? What is it exactly, and how you are able to help also, you know, fellow software companies in overcoming these?
So the best way to look at it is that a lot of the software that has been built, let's say about 10 years ago, all of that software has been built with more humans in mind. So typically companies have been charging per seat, per license essentially, and the bigger the teams in sales, the more revenue it meant, right? So it kind of made sense back in the days. But these days, all the companies out there, they want to be essentially lean and mean. Profitability is really the name of the game rather than top line growth. So it's not about more top line growth, grow. Even though you can still argue some companies, especially the AI companies, they raise so much money, they're definitely not profitable, and they're just growing like crazy. Whether that revenue is sticky or not, that's another question, right? To be answered. But I think you have to be playing smart because, so let's say in our case, we only raised $500,000. So we are VC backed as a company, though we never have burned that cash. We've been always profitable since day zero. Um, so, and that's because we always had this mindset of always being lean and mean. Just like, we want to make sure our customers are lean and mean through using our multiple products that are priced relatively inexpensive because we charge for the actual consumption rather than the licenses. Same, we were looking at us as well. We want to be lean and mean. So when we procure any softwares out there, we look at them from kind of not from naturally from a seat perspective, but from a consumption perspective, right? So if you're using more and more of that software, then we're happy to pay for the actual consumption. These are API calls or OpenAI model, yeah, right. So where you're just consuming credits there. That's how we're looking kind of at the software landscape, and then we see a lot more sort of consumption. A lot more sort of what we call the CAC shifting from labor over to software. So CAC meaning cost of customer acquisition. So within, when you're running your business, you look at the CAC. So how much does it cost you to acquire, to bring into net new dollars into your business? Typically, labor is definitely the number one chunk in the business. So this is why we're also going after the labor. Like we're trying to essentially reduce headcount in sales, and particularly in this particular top of funnel. And by doing so, it becomes a lot more efficient for you to be acquiring these net new dollars out there. Yeah, does that answer the question?
Yeah. So how what you do currently, Frank, and they're gonna go back about the strategy that you used, but how that complement what, for example, people in marketing would be doing for their sales workforce.
People in marketing. So typically, marketing people aren't really responsible for the pipeline generation, let's say on outbound. They definitely are responsible for driving MQLs and making sure these marketing qualified leads, turn into revenue, right, on the inbound front. But yeah, definitely, it's not happening on the outbound front. As in, marketing typically does not own the pipeline generation from an outbound perspective. This is where typically sales owns that. So I'll give you an example in our case. So in our case, we have head of growth who owns the inbound generation of leads across all the forges. And then, so the primary KPI that he looks at is initially MQL. And the reason why we look at MQLs, at least, as a first metric, is because we are product-led company. So we run in the form of PLG, where majority of the sales that happen within the Forge ecosystem happen through the self-service model, right? So the user goes, hooks up with the credit card and goes and purchases. And we even have, some people that, pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in this particular way, right? So where there's no essentially sales assisted sort of funnel as well. And that again helps us with CAC, meaning that we don't need to have as many salespeople processing these leads, etc. So we have currently right now only 3 sales people, then 3 people in marketing, and about 2 people in customer success, and then we have 3 automation people. So on the automation front, actually, we have one person who's in revenue operations. So she does typically everything to do with RevOps, HubSpot, etc. We have a guy that does automation flows in N8N. The goal of that is to make sure that you are killing all the repetitive processes that you have in the business. And by doing so, then you're alleviating the pressure to hire more individuals to tackle kind of different kind of manual processes that you have internally. And then the final person that we have, which is, I think, quite new, is still in the space, is what's called a GTM engineer. So a go-to-market engineer, or I personally call these individuals sales development engineers, essentially people that are very technically savvy, that know how to use APIs, know how to use some sophisticated tools out there in order to generate the pipeline for the business. So we have one as well right now, recently, that we hired. And yeah, generally speaking, how we think about the business ourselves, right, and which is what I recommend every founder to do, is how can you achieve these superior sort of, let's call pipeline levels with the least headcount possible, right? How can you orchestrate pipeline by not hiring individuals, right? And that typically means you actually need to hire people on the automation front, right? So because there's a compound effect essentially that happens, because as you build out more what I would describe evergreen campaigns, sequences, right, that you keep on compounding, it becomes much easier and easier for you to attain your targets, right, systematically. So it's all about compound thought process. Same as we're compounding softwares and we're selling that to the same user and the same customer. On the acquisition front, when we think about content or anything else that we do, we think about, if we're putting in some work, will this work last? So, that's how we think about, content. YouTube, for example, we're very aggressive on YouTube, where we're putting out 1 YouTube video per day on YouTube. So it's things like that that allows us to scale our company efficiently. And I think the other side of the coin, right, where you're putting in the efforts and it has a short-term effect. That's, let's say, spending money on Google Ads, things like that, for example. Right? So we still spend money on Google Ads, specifically bidding on competitive keywords, because in our space, we are one of the, what I would describe, one of the reddest oceans, like sales technology, email, something to do with emails. Generally speaking, there's a lot, hundreds of players. And so you need to apply what I call red ocean strategies. In our case, like aggressive red ocean strategies, where you're trying to position yourself essentially differently than all the rest of the tools in the market. So unique positioning is definitely super important in order for you to be able to scale.
Frank, thank you. You answered a lot of questions that also I had in my mind. And especially I wanted to ask you about the GTM engineer. You asked that. You also answered, the question that, about the scaling the business and reaching the ARR you are at today. What I loved about what you just mentioned now is, about people should be in sales, tech savvy, right? And they need to understand, how to do the integration, because, and this is actually, I'm very big fan. You mentioned it 2 times, the red ocean and the blue ocean, and I'm very big fan of the blue ocean strategy. You need to differentiate yourself. You need to create your own market sometimes. But yet, as you mentioned in the intro, you need to remember that still you have some kind of competition, even if it's not visible. But now I believe, this is my theory, new founders, or let's say younger founders, are getting these. Yet, there are still, what I don't want to be like very aggressive, but people who still goes by old playbooks, and they believe that this automation, including technology, using AI, is non-useful. So for these doubters or naysayers, I would say, what kind of real examples you can give, Frank, from maybe some use cases that you've seen yourself serving your customers?
Well, definitely, I can mention our what we call pinnacle product, which is Agent Frank, so named after me. So I spent in sales for over a decade. We've built out one of the best AI SDRs out there in the world, essentially, which is an AI sales agent, which allows you to build a sales pipeline fully autonomously. So you outline your value proposition in the software. You then set out your ICP in the software. Against the ICP, we source the leads for you. And then we craft a unique email to every single individual in the language of your choice. So we're combining essentially two data sets for every single email. Data set number one is the value, essentially what we call the seller data. So what do we know about you and your business? And then we match that data set programmatically with what do you know about each and every individual. So for, let's say, about you, Mehmet, we would go and search on the web everything that we know about you on your website, maybe your podcast even site, then going over to your LinkedIn profile, essentially giving us a very good context about you as a person based on publicly available data. So we call that the buy data. So we're matching the seller data and the buy data, we're stitching that together, and then we compute on top of that in the language of your choice. Then we deliver that email, a beautiful email, which is highly relevant. We actually do that up to 3 emails over a span of 2 weeks that we deliver to the prospects. And then if the prospects reply back, then what happens is then the agent will respond back to the prospect based on what's available, what we call the knowledge base within the software. So knowledge base is like let's call it digital brain. So this is where you upload all your information about your business. So let's say sales playbook, pricing, FAQs, etc. This is essentially what the sales rep typically has access to in order for him or her to do the job, right? Which is, responding to replies of prospects and then trying to book them into a meeting. So when there's this conversation happening back and forth, right, between the agent, which is fully autonomous, AI based, right, replies back within a few minutes, he has a goal in mind, and that typical goal is to book a meeting. So what happens is, Mehmet, I would take, let's say, your calendar link, let's say from HubSpot or Google Calendar link or Calendly, whatever. I will hook it up to Agent Frank, and Agent Frank will use that calendar link to then book in a meeting with the prospect. Alternatively, Agent Frank can also ask for the link, for calendar link from the prospect, essentially. So that's an example, a real life example of where you're leveraging AI capabilities, automation, essentially, to drive real business value. This was not something that was possible even like a year ago, and the AI agents haven't been working really well actually last year, because still this whole technology about around sort of agentic stuff is still in its infancy, and it takes time to naturally to develop that. But we're one of the first ones in the market that has released the agent, and we don't discount the humans, meaning proper sales teams. What we believe is, and this is our unique positioning, is that the way we see the world evolving over the next 5 years is that humans will be working with AI agents in tandem together to achieve significantly superior output levels and to drive down cost per unit. So let's say in our case, the cost per unit would be, let's say, meeting booked, right? So how many dollars does it euros does it take you to book one single meeting, right? So you're looking to optimize that and get that down as close to, as low as possible, essentially, right? So, that's where we believe the world is headed, not just in the world of sales, but also in other parts of the business, whether it's finance, customer support, etc. We will see leaner and meaner teams across different organizations, but I hardly believe that you can run majority of your business on just AI agents.
Yeah, just out of curiosity, so Frank the agent, um, like, does it have a, I would say, limitation of, like, for example, it can handle this amount of messaging or like this number of customers per day. So you need to have maybe like two Franks, AI agent Frank, or like, is it really like unlimited? Like you can just put it on your whole, ICP database, I would say.
You can definitely do that because our agent Frank runs on the other 5 forges. So think of it
Mhm.
this way: that agent Frank, as the pinnacle product of the Forge ecosystem, when we build another forge, so another software, we hook it up to the agent for the agent to use. So from a scalability standpoint, what needs to happen is you need to build out what's called email infrastructure for the agents. So we run our own private servers and shared servers as well, where essentially the agent sits on top of one of the, let's say, email accounts, and that email account is being used to engage with prospects. And that's something, yes, can be scaled. Typically, though, customers process about 1,000 leads at any given moment, and that's enough for them. But if somebody wants to process up to 10,000 at any given moment, they can do so, right? Typically, it's not about, spraying and praying in our, in our line
Of
of
course.
business. It's about delivering relevant messaging. And typically when you deliver relevant messaging, you will get, replies back from the prospect. So you don't, in most of the cases, you don't actually need to scale as much. Um, but it really depends on the customer. So some customers have, millions of potential businesses as part of their TAM, so total addressable market, while others only have in total 1,000 companies. So if you only have 1,000 companies in total, my argument is you don't need to use much, kind of automation software, etc. Like automation software and a lot of, AI agents and everything. It really comes in handy when you have a huge TAM that you need to go after. This is when you start thinking about hiring salespeople to process the TAM, right? So, and my argument is that's really a bad idea to be hiring just, gazillions of people to be doing that.
Sure. The future of SDR, because like what you described of what the AI agent is capable to do today is manual work. I know because I've worked with SDRs previously, and I know how difficult it is for them because their whole focus is, and you mentioned it, to go search, summarize, making sure that they are contacting someone that might be interested in whatever you are offering. So as we move forward, do you think the role of SDRs will be completely given to AI, or we still need someone, human, who would be kind of co-working with the agents? And the reason I'm asking you, Frank, and like usually people who enters the sales properly, and I mean, not all the time, but I've seen like successful people starting their careers as SDRs, moving later on as account executives, or what some people they call them sales reps, and then going to leadership. So putting the AI in the picture, and considering both from technology perspective, human perspective, and career perspective. So how do you envision this to be?
So, like I mentioned previously, I don't think that you can fully move over to the fully agentic world. So I'll give you an example why not. So let's say one of the things that you definitely want to do as a company in B2B, you definitely want to be doing what's called cold calling. You want to definitely cold call your prospects. Guess what? Cold calling as a channel when it comes from an AI standpoint, right? AI cold calling is illegal in places like US and Europe. So if in big markets, it's illegal to be leveraging any form of robocalling, agentic calling, essentially. It's all the same, essentially. Using systems essentially to call your prospects autonomously. If that is illegal, then that gives the evergreen channel essentially for the humans to leverage, right, long term. So my thinking is that really where humans will come in definitely in handy is one is on the cold calling front. So that will, I think, never go away. And B, also on what's called social selling. So essentially building a brand as a human, right? So building a brand or being an extension essentially of the company's brand, right? So typically I say there have to be like 3 to 10 people that represent the company every single day on places like LinkedIn, etc. And that's not something an AI agent can do. successfully. This is where you definitely need a human in play, right? So these are the two main, I think, activities that would remain under human. But where AI agents definitely come into play quite nicely is the other two channels in sales, which is one is email, right? So humans, most of them struggle to write really great email copies, and it takes them typically 10 to 15 minutes to write a really great email copy before they would send off. So they're just too slow to write really great email copies as well. So this is where agentic capabilities are much more superior in those particular cases. And then the other channel, the last one, is essentially social. So in social, I also believe that you probably received a lot of templates on, let's say, LinkedIn, right? So everybody keeps on sending the same templates. You can see that it's probably sent to like other 10 or 100 people or 1,000 people. I don't know how many, right? But you can see the template, and people have a fatigue to looking at static piece of communication like a template because it has been sent to other people as well. So this is where, for me, social channels like LinkedIn, etc., they're sort of similar to email, as in you will need to compute these messages. They're just different to email, right? For me, LinkedIn is a bit like WhatsApp, right? So you don't need to sign off, best regards, Frank Sondors, or something like that. They have to be short and snappy, and I think you have to lead with a question. This is what I typically would say. So yeah, this is an example where you'll be sort of forced to, depending on the channel, to either use the human or the AI agent. And we still, I think, haven't seen a lot of regulations kicking in from a kind of agentic standpoint. So there may be, again, some more regulations coming into force as we progress. But yeah, that's something still to be seen. I think this is why it's very important to be leveraging essentially software that can accommodate both the humans and the AI agents, rather than using one software for humans and another one for AI agents. I don't believe that as a very smart sales leader, you will be using two different softwares to build sales pipeline. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe also, Frank, correct me if I'm wrong, like from integration with other CRM systems, for like, for example, a normal, in the normal way we used to do it. So the SDR will try to reach to someone, and then they will look to whatever CRM system they're using, say, hey, like, try to connect. I tried to do. So, like, is there any integration that you can do today, with CRM systems just to update? Or is it just like you give the infrastructure and just, the sequence, and then still someone have to go and log manually what's going on?
No, we just, like, I think, other sales execution softwares, we integrate with a lot of CRMs. So the typical ones: Salesforce, HubSpot, Pipedrive. We're about to release Attio, etc. So we are releasing. We are gonna have about 10 integrations very shortly, like native ones, bidirectionals, right? So where you can sync. And then apart from that, there's other systems that we integrate with. So something that's, I think, typically missed is we integrate with Slack, so you can get the replies either by humans, or AI agents fed directly into Slack. So that's also really powerful to be always keeping on track of what's happening within software when it comes to replies. Yeah, but I think it doesn't matter which software you are. It doesn't matter whether it's sales or accounting, etc. You'd want to definitely integrate with the rest of your ecosystem, right? Which is the core ecosystem, and that will be typically the CRM stuff. I think that's the main one, and something like Slack or Microsoft Teams, that will be another one. But then again, depending on the industry, there could be a bunch of other sort of ecosystems that you'll need to integrate with.
Yeah, great. Like, if I want to have kind of a look into the future, Frank, like, how do you envision, the forges, I would say, and Salesforce and the other forges to be in the future? Like, any new markets, any, some other areas that you want to be in the near future and in the long term future also as well?
Yeah, that's a good question. So from a market standpoint, the typical markets that all software is going into would be US, North America, and Europe, right? This is where you typically play. However, as sort of competitors are busy in the US markets or the typical markets, we're thinking about what we call other markets as well in the world. So what are the other markets in the world that would say mimic, let's say, the US market from, I don't know, GDP per capita, how much software they buy, how big is the economy, like all that stuff. And a playbook that I have learned from the Israelis is in your early days, you should be definitely going to the Japanese market. And that's exactly what we're doing. So we will be going, and opening that Japanese market in the next couple months. And what that means is, translating the website, translating the software, making sure that the products work also in Japanese, when you compute emails and stuff like that, right? So all that is like super, super important. So yeah, that's what we're going to be doing from a kind of market standpoint. So while competitors zig, we zag essentially, so we doing something, we are essentially on a slightly different swimming lane, because you definitely want to tap into the markets where you don't have as much competition, right? Especially when you're in red ocean market. So go into underserved markets with a great product, right? So and it should be fine. And Japanese love, sales, they love AI stuff, they love AI agents, so there's a lot of that. There could be other markets that, we could have explored. I just, came back from Singapore, and in Singapore, it's also a very developed market, but maybe it's not as big, or not from a kind of economy standpoint, or they don't buy as much software, for example, as the Japanese. So these are all these things that you need to consider. Now, from a kind of product standpoint, so we have 6 products in total. The pinnacle product is Agent Frank, and then we have other products predominantly used by humans, or Agent Frank uses these other products. But we will be building another 4 products at least. So currently we're what we call in the stage where we have an ecosystem of products. We'll go V1 ecosystem, where we cater for the world of email. And then we're in about a month or 2 looking to also launch LinkedIn as a second channel to email, so that the agent can say work across LinkedIn, or you as a human, you can use LinkedIn to engage with your prospect. So that's the next expansion from a kind of channel standpoint. But then we will have other products that will be predominantly looking at increasing conversion rates within the funnel. So definitely there's more products to come from us. I can't share too much, but we're definitely hungry, and definitely are going to be aggressively building more products. And especially these days, it's so much easier to be building products than, say, 5 years ago, because you have, these apps like Cursor, for example, right? That helps you to augment your engineers, right? And increase the output levels of every single engineer. So we're definitely giving that to every single top engineer that we have on the team, especially senior engineers, right? So to increase their output levels. So yeah.
Absolutely. And to your point, like there's no better time today than start building something, because it's became
Yeah.
much, much easier. And I think, Frank, honestly, like it's not a compliment, because by the way, like I knew about Salesforce before even like we've met, and we were introduced for doing this podcast. I was saying, oh my God, like if like this is if I am a founder today, right, especially in the SaaS space, and I don't have any sales experience, like this is the tool that probably I would be at least experimenting, and I'm sure they would see benefits, because now everyone talks about, because before it was like, yeah, it's like building the team and having the right team. So now, and ideas and building executing the ideas. So I think things are getting easy. And actually what you have done, Frank, is also, I'm not saying you made it completely easy, still they have to do a lot of work. And you just mentioned they need to go show their faces, have some social presence and do the social selling. But at least from the outreach part, I think you did a lot of heavy lifting for them, because some people, when I talk to them, they don't know also like majority of the things. What I liked also, Frank, honestly, is that you explained this infrastructure. I didn't want to waste time, because I think by now people knows, about the infrastructure that you need to have for outreach, because people think, yeah, like you just put the list in a Gmail or like whatever Outlook and you send. I'm telling them, no, it doesn't work this way. You need a proper infrastructure to handle that. So I mean, like you've built this from the ground up, and I think people will benefit out of it. But if we want to give a message to people like who have ideas now in mind and they want to start building, and maybe they are not like you, Frank, coming from a sales background, maybe they are coming from a pure technologist, like I would say practitioner background in technology, and you want to give them this, encouragement to go and start. So what you can tell them?
I think the biggest piece of advice, and I think it has been said many times, is just go and speak to your customers or to the users essentially, right? So just go and just do that, and do that every day. Try to have 5 to 10 meetings a day with different with the users in the segment where you're digging for a problem and for a solution that you're looking to build. Because by speaking to the customers, and I typically speak to 10 to 20 customers on a daily basis at least. So if you're going at that velocity, it's very hard to get things wrong, right? Because you have so much sort of input data, so much feedback that's coming from your users on a daily basis. So you can't get it wrong. So that's why spend a lot of time with your users, and whether you're gonna build it on something like Lovable or some other kind of AI engineering software, it's up to you. Or you're gonna get a proper CTO, or you're the CTO yourself. So I think really go after real problems, that need to be solved. And the way to figure this out, whether something is real or not, is really by speaking to the users, and many of them. So, before we launched Salesforge, we did 40 user interviews, properly recorded, semi-structured interviews, and we got 4 paying pre-orders before even shipping a single line of code. So that gave us the conviction that we're onto something, right? Um, so it's that's the validation work that you should be doing. So yeah.
Absolutely. And just like final thing, Frank, as founder and leader also as well, like how do you continue to grow also on, personally and professionally to make sure that you're steering, let's say, the company towards the sustained success?
Good question. So yes, so I think that the companies that are the fastest growing, that typically consume a lot of knowledge on a daily/weekly basis, and they feed off kind of that knowledge from, I would say, other founders that probably are smarter, better than them, or could be in different categories. Um, Definitely, another thing that you can do is attending, industry specific events. So let's say I'm in SaaS. So I would right now, I'm flying right now into 2 conferences. One in Croatia, one in Austin, Texas. And both conferences are about SaaS, right? So, and you're essentially learning from other SaaS leaders in terms of how they build their companies, what are the pains that they're going through, etc. So this is something that you definitely want to do. If you don't have the resources to go to these conferences, fair enough. The other thing that you can do is just approach people on LinkedIn, and say you would love to grab some time for 15 minutes to learn a thing or two from them. That's definitely something I've done, and other people that have done also with me. And otherwise, then specifically, let's say for sales, there's a networking, let's say, community called saleshookup.com. You can sign up for that community, and then on a weekly basis you'll be connecting with another sales individual somewhere around the world. So that's something that I still do today. And otherwise, if you're looking to connect with other founders on a weekly basis, then you can check out something what's called lunchclub.com. So this is where you're putting yourself into routine to be speaking to people on a weekly basis. You have to force yourself essentially to go out there and engineer for luck, what I call. So the more people you speak to, the more events you go to, the more lucky you will become essentially, right? Luck just doesn't come out of nowhere. It's because you're speaking to individuals. It's because you're jumping even on a pod like this and stuff like that. This is how you engineer luck for yourself and your business. So going and being out there, having eyeballs on you all the time, it can only benefit you, right? So, and you definitely want to figure out your own routine and your own way of connecting to your users or other peers in the industry to always, uh, you know, feeding your brain essentially on a consistent basis. Now, the other thing that you can do, and this is something that applies to me, because most of my ICPs, so ICP means ideal customer profile, so my customers or users, most of them are based on LinkedIn. What I typically say, you can engineer your feed on LinkedIn in a particular way that, let's say you open it on a daily basis and you feel like you learned something. So what I typically say, connect with definitely your customers on LinkedIn, connect with your competitors, so you have them always on the radar, so you can just like in chess, you can navigate, the competition, right? So while they're moving this direction, you may be moving that direction, and so on and so forth, right? So definitely have them always on the radar. So follow your competitors, follow their company CEOs and stuff like that. And then also follow people that just give you free advice on LinkedIn, let's say on a daily basis. So one of those individuals is Jason Lemkin. Jason Lemkin is one of the SaaS VC sort of godfathers out there. He's been around SaaS for a long, long, long time. Back in the days, you could only read about SaaS on his blog, nowhere else. There's no other sort of learnings to be gained. Only Jason Lemkin was kind of sharing knowledge like 10 years ago. So
And now
so
he has the
yeah.
famous conference as well.
Yeah, SaaStr. Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not making it this year, but I went to that one last year. But these are the people, and there's a lot of other people like Jason Lemkin on LinkedIn that share knowledge for free on LinkedIn. You just need to follow them. And the people that don't give you value on LinkedIn, just unfollow them. That's it. That's all you need to do. It sounds easy, but it's like an exercise that you need to do, I don't know, once a month. You spend an hour and you just optimize your feed until you're super happy, and then you feel like every time you open, your LinkedIn feed, you're learning a ton, and then
Absolutely.
it makes you 1% better every single day. That's how you have to. That's the mindset you have to be in.
Absolutely. And I think you are also active on LinkedIn, Frank, so people can follow you there, right?
Yes.
Great. Just one thing before I close, you mentioned it about people who send LinkedIn messages. So for me, if I find out that someone it's nowadays very easy to figure out they just copy it, and they didn't customize it, I usually try to not reply. And I know they put it in the sequence, and I know they will send a reminder after 3 days and 1 week. But people get surprised, especially the ones who write to the point and just like, hey, I have this, need your thought. I reply them and they get surprised, by the way. They said, oh, like you replied us. I said, yeah, because you told me what you want. Like you didn't write me like one full paragraph that I have to go through to understand what you're trying to do. So yeah, be to the point, as Frank mentioned. Frank, really, I appreciate the time, and I think the website is salesforge.ai, right? And
Yes. It is, yeah.
I'm gonna put it in the show notes. I'm gonna put also your LinkedIn, and of course the resources that Frank mentioned. They were very valuable. Frank, thank you very much for the time today. I know like how busy it is for a founder, especially on a Monday morning. Just for people to know, we were recording on a Monday morning, and I appreciate also, all the insights that you gave us today. It's very useful for founders, especially in the SaaS space, B2B SaaS space, and of course, to people in sales in general, how things are shifting and which direction, we are heading to. And as usual, this is how I end my podcast episode. This is for the audience. Guys, if you're just here for the first time, thank you for passing by. I hope you enjoyed. If you did so, give us a thumb up, share it with your friends and colleagues, and subscribe also as well. And if you are one of the people who keep coming again and again, thank you very much for your support, because all what you did this year for the podcast, we are able to be on the top 200 charts in multiple countries on the Apple podcast. And by the way, we are also on Spotify and every podcasting app you might be listening to. And of course, we are on YouTube. So thank you very much for the support, and hope to see you again very soon in a new episode. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hit that subscribe button, share the show with your tech-savvy friends and fellow entrepreneurs, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. Your support means the world to us.